A few seconds. Welcome. See everyone joining in now. Happy to have you. If I can invite everyone just to share in the chat where you're coming from, your city and country. We know we'll have a global audience, and we have some friends and colleagues tuning in via Facebook and YouTube as well. It's being streamed there. Inviting everyone just to share where you're coming from, where you're joining us from today in the chat. That would be great. Mumbai is well represented. Mysore, welcome. Allentown in my neck of the woods. That's great. Love to see it. Brooklyn is here. Awesome. Yeah, please welcome everyone. Please feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from today. We've got a number of countries represented already. We're really happy that you're here for this discussion. So let's go ahead and get started. I just want to introduce Mr. Ganesh Kohli, founder of the IC3 Movement, who's going to offer a little bit of a welcome note. Ganesh, over to you, and we'd love to hear from you, and then we'll get the discussion started.
Thank you so much, Jim. A very warm welcome to all our panelists and all our guests. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm actually here to listen today and not to speak, so I'm going to make this really brief. Thank you firstly for joining in today. I just wanted to remind all of us once again at the beginning of this session on why IC3 exists. Our mission is to bring career and college counseling in every school, to have young people find direction and purpose. And every activity that we do, every action that we take is in that direction. So I invite all our colleagues here to not just be, passive observers, but be an active participant in the movement. And about 2 weeks back, we allowed for you to be a very active participant with this effort of bringing counseling in every school. We are working with governments, we are working with schools in underserved, underprivileged environments. We are working with a whole host of institutions, and you can contribute as well. Very simply, just giving 2 minutes every fortnight or 10 minutes every month, you could make a difference. So I'd encourage you to look up more information on the IC3 Advocates program. We have 142 advocates from 36 countries that have signed up in just the last 12 days. And these include a policeman, they include artists, they include accountants, they include pilots, they include farmers. Everyone who wants to lend their voice to bringing counseling in every school can become an IC3 advocate. So that's one invitation that I have for you. The other invitation I have for this community is to join us at the Annual Ic3 Conference in 2021. It's going to be from the 23rd to the 27th of August. You have the early bird registration and the call for proposals that will close on the 15th of April. This conference is going to be in a hybrid format. You have all the flexibility of coming in person or virtually, and it will be at the Taj Palace in Delhi. You can actually present, submit a session proposal and present either physically or virtually. So it's going to be the first of its kind hybrid conference, and our community is craving for that connection. And I invite all of you not just to attend, but also to lend your voice and your expertise and bring the content for the conversations. So thank you, Jim, for leading this, and I'm incredibly excited to hear Mrs. Shukla and Abhimanyu and John and Kate. What a phenomenal panel. Philadelphia, Indiana, Bloomington, and Mozambique and Mumbai. So it's lovely to have this panel, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ganesh. 5 minutes, very efficient. I'm impressed. Thank you for the welcome note, and again, welcome to everyone that's joining around the world. If you've not had a chance to share where you're joining us from, please do that in the chat. I can see that we're a very global audience, and that's exactly what we intended. For those whom I haven't met and had the chance to introduce myself, my name is Jim McLaughlin, co-chair of the IC3 Movement. I was one of the very first volunteers with IC3 beginning back in 2016, and now I am a full-time team member, but very happy to welcome you all here for this important discussion, really of the now and the next in this current situation. You know, we've come up to some important anniversaries that many of us have now come to about a year in this pandemic. That's a milestone we probably never thought we would mark, but we thought that it was time to have an important discussion about not only what's been happening and what's happening now, but also, you know, what comes next for campuses, high schools and universities around the world. You know, I just want to set a little bit of the direction for this discussion. We really want to encourage interaction and questions, Q&A throughout this entire discussion. I had asked our panelists if they would be okay not moving ahead with slides. We don't have any slides. We wanted to make this interactive. We want to make this a flexible discussion. And really, I'm encouraging, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on not only the Q&A box, but also the chat box there, and really steering the discussion in ways that are meaningful to you all. What we are going to be focusing on is two things. You know, what's happening now, and what will be happening next. And of course, the situation is still very dynamic and changing every day. That's important. There will be a couple of themes that will run throughout this discussion. And largely they're connected to some of the pieces that will also be discussed and leading up to and at the annual IC3 conference at the end of August. And that's human connection in a hybrid world, and aspirations, expectations, and experiences. You know, what do we expect now? What are we experiencing? And that is coming from the perspective of the student, but also the educator. So some of the topics that we'll cover today, of course, the student experience, academic and otherwise. How has the university search and admission process been impacted? What about well-being, not just of students, but of professional staff, teachers, counselors, leaders? Right. So this is a little bit about the arc of the discussion that we hope to have today. And again, welcome. So I'd like to ask our team if we can. We're going to start with a poll. All right. We want to engage you throughout. We want to get some feedback throughout. So I am going to offer an introduction to the panel, but I first want to start with our first series of poll questions. All right, so the first, and I'll just quickly go through. What is the current status of instruction at your school or institution? Are you completely virtual, completely in person, or is it a true hybrid? And that's as of today. In what manner are you instructing virtually for those that are doing virtual? And I think most of us are in some capacity. In what manner are you instructing virtual lessons and classes? And then the last question here in this first series is, by September of 2021, do you expect your school or institution to be operating and teaching predominantly in person? Now, no one knows this, right? So, you know, what we can do, but this is really more of an expectation and an intention question, right? It's going to be held to this. We want to get a sense of where you are in your minds. Okay, so let's just give it another 30 seconds here. Cassandra, thanks. I see your note here for those that need to get to that third question. You know, assuming there's some piece there, we'll keep that in mind if that skews the results, but this will still give us a good sense of where we are. I think there was some assumption that, even for those in person, there was at least some virtual instruction happening. That may not be fully the case. All right, and IC3 team, you can close the polls when you've got a critical mass, and then we'll move on with the discussion. Okay, so thanks for chiming in. All right, so what we're seeing here initially, all right, so we're seeing that, of course, a good mix. I think the majority of those are operating in a hybrid, it looks like, at this point in terms of instruction at your school and institutions. Only 10% have said they're completely in person, so that gives us a little bit of a sense of where we are. Completely virtual, about 35%. Okay, I think this next question is one that's been a common discussion amongst educators and teachers and counselors, is how you're operating. It looks like predominantly there is a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous. All right, the synchronous matter is still a significant portion. 35% of schools are engaging students all at the same time, and I think there's of course some factors to consider there. If you're at a school, most of your students are probably in the same time zone, whereas if you're in a university, that may or may not be the case. We may get into that a little bit more. And then the third question, I was very interested to see sort of what the expectation or the intention is here. And 57%, a majority, expect that they'll predominantly be in person by the fall, but still a significant portion are looking at a hybrid and a balanced mix. Okay. All right. So thanks for chiming in on that. And we've got some more polls throughout. So stay with us. I'm trying to keep an eye on some of the comments in the chat as well. So give me an opportunity to introduce our panel. We've got really an amazing panel of leaders and educators here from many different parts of the world. So, I'd ask graciously if our panelists would allow me to bring down the level of formality in my introductions here a little bit. I think we could spend probably half of this time reading all of the accomplishments and bios of our four panelists today. But allow me to start by introducing Mr. Abhimanyu Basu. Mr. Basu is the Dean of Academics at the Dhirubhai Ambani International School in Mumbai. More than 23 years of experience in education, has held a variety of roles as a leader, a teacher, a trainer, consultant. Abhimanyu also serves on the IC3 Advisory Committee. So we're really happy to welcome you, Abhimanyu. And I'll just ask the IC3 team, please share the link where those attendees can actually read the full bios of all of our panelists. We want to make that available to you as well. Abhimanyu, welcome. Next, let me welcome Ms. Kate Magla-Kalidze. I hope my pronunciation, Kate, was all right. I know you can correct me there. But Kate is the head of school at Enco Riverside International School in Maputo, Mozambique. Kate originally hails from Tbilisi in Georgia. Kate is also the group university admission manager at Enco Education and is overseeing the counseling operations for 15 schools across 9 African countries. So amazing perspective here on the panel from Kate. And Kate also serves as a volunteer leader on the IC3 Africa Committee. Welcome, Kate. We're really happy to have you here. Dr. John Wilkerson, Assistant Vice President, International Services and Executive Director of International Admissions at Indiana University, Bloomington, here in the United States. John is a true leader in international higher education, and we're thrilled to have him here. John also serves on the Board of Trustees at the IC3 Institute. So welcome, John. And last but certainly not least, Mrs. Sudarshana Shukla, head of the Learning Resource Center and guidance counselor and IB coordinator at the Cathedral and John Connon Senior School in Mumbai. Many of you would I'm sure have met Sudarshana over the years and have worked very closely with her. I'm honored to also share that Sudarshana was the recipient of the Molly Abraham Lifetime Achievement Award of 2020. And of course, that's the most prestigious IC3 award. And that was awarded back at the IC3 Festival in December. So truly an awesome panel. And let's begin the discussion. So let me start with the now, and let me begin by just asking the panelists the poll question that we started off. So what's the current situation on your campuses? What's the current status of instruction at your school or institution? Really, what's happening now? Sudarshana, if we can start with you, what's going on now on your campus?
Thank you, Jim, for that lovely introduction, and I'm honored to be part of this wonderful panel. And what an exciting topic to be talking about today. So the current situation remains pretty much the same as it was on March 13th last year, except for the fact that we made a brave attempt to come back to school for preliminary exams for the board giving classes, and the next day the government shut us down because the cases in Maharashtra started rising. So we are synchronous and virtual 100% at the moment. But referring to your poll question of September 2021, expectations are that we certainly will be back in person because vaccinations are in full swing. What's really worrisome in the recent week or so is that a lot of children are testing positive in India, and there seems to be some variant strain here. So that's going to be something we need to be cautious of and cognizant of. But other than that, I think we will continue till as far as we can, and then be back in school by September, hopefully.
Thanks, Sudarshana. I'm just sharing also in the chat here. Please put questions and comments there. We want to keep this as interactive throughout the discussion as we can. Kate, if we can go to you next, what's happening firstly in Maputo? We know that, and if you could give us any insights into what's happening across the system of ENCO schools around Africa, that would be great.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, like we'll do. Thank you, Jim, again for the introduction and for this opportunity to be part of this panel today. So the situation here right now with ENCO Riverside, we're completely fully open, but the government put a lot of new regulations, which actually is expanding the space for each student in the school and the social distancing. And it's just which is a little bit difficult depending the cafeterias or kind of any kind of food services at school. So the students have to travel with their lunch and with their water. So in that situation, we are kind of forced to do still blended learning because the number of students and the facility that we have cannot definitely take all students at once. So we have to alternate students from day to day to make sure that everybody has the proportion of synchronous and like online and the face-to-face classes. So these kids, the children seem very happy. They are very excited. They stay at school from very morning to late. And the general situation here with the pandemic seems kind of a little bit calmer. It was very, very rapid up during January, but it's with the statistics, it's also going down as well. So we just hope that it's gonna be better.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for that summary. So we've got two completely different situations right out of the gate. And Abhimanyu, what's happening at the Dhirubhai Ambani International School right now?
Hi, so we got back to school in the month of February as the government had allowed us to conduct examination and exam related stuff. So between February and March, beginning of March, I think we completed our mock exams, and when the kids first time came back to school, they finished their internal assessment related work and all of that. So very different, but I think the excitement that we saw in the eyes of the kids to just get back to the physical campus and for them to have conducted the full mock exams was a great thing. At this point of time, I think we are just having to complete certain components of the IB program. So, for example, I know that they're sort of finishing their theater monologue recordings, and some people are doing their artworks and getting that sort of done with. And we are hopeful that we'd be able to have the students in school for the final exams in the month of May. How things stands in Maharashtra, the government is going ahead. I think the government is going ahead all over India to conduct the examinations for grade 10 and 12 for each of the states, including CBSE and ICSE, which is the national boards. And knowing that the size of the country that India is, I think the one direction is that they want to go ahead and have those offline examinations. If I just look back in the month of August, when India was going through another peak, I think you had the state NWT, NEET, and joint entrance exams. All of that happened at that time. So looking at where things are, I think we're patiently waiting to see how things unfold. But if exams are going to happen for one, I think it's going to happen for all the exam boards. That's how things are. Although the IB has got a non-exam route, but I don't think that is going to be applicable to India as long as the national exams are set. And going forward in September, I agree with Sudarshan. I think we'll be having the kids on board in school. However, I don't think it's going to happen all together. I feel that there would be a period of hybrid learning, and then it would lead, because it's all about gaining the confidence of people. So, I know when we had those 200 kids who came back to school, that's our size of the grade 10s and grade 12s, in the month of February. How many conversations we had to have with the parents and to gain their confidence to look at, we did testing for everyone who was in school for 2 weeks. For that 4-week period, everyone was tested twice a week. And the school took that up. So we had the infrastructure, we took it up. We had everybody at 4 meters distance, but it was an experience. And the reason we went ahead, because we thought that if the kids are going to do this in the month of May for their final exams, then they better have an experience of this. With the examination stress under this scenario, they would have been really, further challenged.
Thanks, Abhimanyu. And I'm just sharing also, Fulgent's chimed in from Burundi to say that they've never been confined and will be finishing exams tomorrow. So just another perspective there. Others on the call, please feel free to chime in and share that. We want to learn from each other. So John, what's happening with you in Indiana? And then what I'll also do is begin to kind of shift the conversation. And I want to put out to our panelists, of all, and of course, we'll get your take on what's happening now, John. But the next is, of all of the innovations and changes and strategies that you've employed at your schools and institutions this year, some of them I think will probably go by the wayside after we get back to somewhat of a normal scenario, and some will stay. Of those innovations and new strategies that you've tried, which will last, which will really be impactful and almost change, how we've worked? So John, what's happening in Indiana? And if you're ready for that next question, well, I'll let you lead us off there.
Well, what's happening in Indiana is an unstable internet connection at the moment, but I think I've got that sorted out. University, of course, like most universities in the US, we're in a hybrid model of instruction, both asynchronous and synchronous, just given the size and program offerings that we have. We're seeing great progress actually on the vaccination front, which is exciting for us. Fortunately, Bloomington was spared any type of surge or peak. We worked very closely with the Indiana Department of Health in that respect, and really doing all that we can, as most of our colleagues are, to educate students in particular about safety protocols. We are poised to start vaccinating anyone age 16 and older, and the state is dropping the residency requirement. And we're seeing that in a lot of states that are doing well in terms of vaccine rollout. The goal there, I think, for most universities is to offer the vaccine to as many students as possible before they head off campus for the summer. That residency piece is key, of course, to our international population and to our non-Indiana resident students. So having access for them to the vaccine, I think, is key. Going forward, what's going to stick? That's a tricky question. I think one thing field-wide that is likely to stick is significant changes to U.S. admissions policy. It will be interesting to see what those changes are that stick around. I do think greater test flexibility, test optional admission, we're likely to see expansion there, especially with, for most universities, 2 solid cohorts providing data for us to really see how our students performing, and the holistic admission review that is a hallmark of U.S. institutions is really to the test, pardon the pun, optional admissions. And I think that's a good thing. If there is something good to come out of the pandemic in the admissions world, it is the extent to which it has pushed U.S. universities to really examine what we're doing in terms of our admissions practices. And my hope is that this goes beyond just test optional questions and really starts to hone in on access and equity. So I think that's one. There are other things that will stick, but that's what I'll throw out, and hopefully a positive change.
Thanks, John, for getting the ball rolling there. I'll open that question up, right? So John is feeling that there some of the fundamental shifts in admission practices, at least in the U.S., that have been adopted over this last year, in large part because of the pandemic, maybe accelerated some things that were already there, or in a direction that some institutions were already headed. But Sudarshana, what have you seen in terms of at the school level? And maybe that's counseling related, maybe not, but just in terms of some of the new things that you've tried, and what do you anticipate will stick that could impact the next for schools?
For our office, actually, it's worked really well. Being virtual, I've been able to reach out to far more students, right? Starting right from the 8th grade onwards. The change I've seen with students, the seniors are concerned, is quite noticeable, and I think that's within our entire community, because I see that on our social network as well, is that students are now applying to multiple countries. So historically, our school had only majority students looking at the United States, and very few, about 10%, looking at the UK and Canada. But in the last year, we had students applying to multiple countries, and we didn't really stop that from happening, because families were undergoing financial stresses. Students were unsure of the social and political scenarios in countries. Health policies were changing, and so that became a little tricky. And we said, that's fine. And what became a little more, changes in ethical policies also were seen in higher ed institutions became very cognizant of the fact that families, even though they'd been admitted on early decision and wanted to change their mind, they were released from their early decision agreements on a case-to-case basis because of changes in financial positions from the time they applied to the time they had to join college. So I think a lot of ethical changes happening as well, keeping in mind the best fit for a student academically, socially, and financially. So that's a change I think will continue with our students at least for the next couple of years, till I think this pandemic becomes an endemic and there is some sort of stability, because there's this yo-yo happening globally, right? There's in the West, when the numbers go up, in our region they seem to go down, and then it's just the other way around in a couple of months. So it's parents are worried, students are worried as well, and while higher ed institutions have been absolutely fabulous in supporting the students and as counselors. Also, I feel what's happened is I'm talking about in the last year, is that Jim, I remember you setting up a meeting with me to better understand contextually what we are going through, and for us to understand what you're going through, just for a better understanding of the situations we're in and how we can. And you weren't the only one, so there were other admissions officers who set up one-on-one meetings just to have a conversation and make that special effort. And I was absolutely floored by that effort. How mindful and how sensitive you are, higher ed institutions in general are, to have these conversations at length and trying to understand us. So I feel like that kind of conversation and that connection, it existed, but it's just become stronger.
Thanks, Sudarshana. So you're saying in terms of your counseling efforts, and then perhaps we can use this as a bridge to bring in Kate and Abhimanyu as well on this topic. In terms of counseling, obviously you're fully virtual now and engaging with, I assume, of course, students, but perhaps also parents. Do you think once you're even in person, will you continue those virtual engagements to either supplement or as a main component of your interactions with the counseling curriculum itself?
Definitely supplement it. I feel that the outreach on a larger level virtually is very, very, very convenient. And it also makes it convenient when we are working out of office hours. In school, if you're working in most parents work, and then in the evenings they're available for a virtual session or a Q&A session. And then you can break it down into country-wise virtual engagement. So I feel like we will continue with the virtual engagement even when we come back in person. But I think all human beings by nature are social, and it's going to be. I remember the first thing the students said within a month or two is, "Miss, we just miss hanging out in your office." And I was really moved, and I said, I miss seeing all of you too. There's such a buzz around people when you're there in person. And so I said, well, let's make it happen. So I said, children are very tech savvy, and I said, you decide what you want to do and how we can hang out together. And so we started these Friday meetings every evening, and the students would lead the meeting by setting up the tone and asking questions, and a meeting which was set up for about half an hour to 40 minutes invariably led to an hour and a half to 2 hours. So that engagement and connection with the students on a need basis worked really well. And I think putting the child or the student in the driver's seat works beautifully.
And Kate, let's go to you next, and then Abhimanyu on the same question. Innovations that you've seen in this last year and that you feel could stick and impact the next for schools.
Hello again. That was amazing probably year with the innovations, because schools and universities, especially in our area in education, I think that was one of the few crises when education did not completely shut down and it got even more active than it was before. So that was promising actually. And on the other hand, we had these students, and for example, this period last year, like anxiety, students completely lost, what we're gonna do, how we're gonna handle this process. And as I mentioned during last year, our accepted admission and attendance rate to the universities raised by 10% comparing to 2019. So that was a lot, like Sudarshana also mentioned, this is the way of communication, how you do it. It's in-person communication, definitely is different. Even now, every day, I just love watching students in the school year around, because they are just so happy to be together. But I would say that they are very conscious, they're very careful, they're really, really, we don't have to remind them how to behave. That's another one. I think the level of personal responsibility is also they grown between this kind of teenagers as well. So they realize it consciously that it's a real threat, and they accept the fact that this might be with us for a while, but they still need to go on. So they are still kind of attending classes regularly. They're attending, I mean, for example, we had summative tasks going on. They were like same way engaged, they enrolled and concerned about the results, or because this results is gonna go to my transcript. This is great. Maybe this is this part of the world. We've been a little bit lucky here. But I'm happy to see that they are not stressed, so they are accepting the changes that comes. So I think the current situation gives me hope that it's gonna be back. Back to normal, like we say, but this normal will not look like the same normal that it was like 1 year ago. So I think this our virtual engagement will be just a regular part of our life, and I find it very useful as well, because in our world, especially when we have to share so much information, and information is our strongest weapon, virtual engagement for me, definitely together with the physical one, is completely beneficial. I see it as an advantage.
Thanks, Kate. And I'm acknowledging also in the chat, Rachna, thank you for your question. Rachna was asking just for some feedback on some potential pieces that he's seen in terms of maybe higher proportions of students ending up on wait list or denied. I'm not going to pose that question to the panelists, but I am going to invite others who are on the call. I know we've got both university representatives and a lot of school counselors from around the world. If some of you could chime in and perhaps share some feedback with Rachna in the chat, I think that would be great. Abhimanyu, to you, specific innovations perhaps that you've seen that you feel will stick and potentially change what's next for schools?
So I feel, one thing definitely is going to stay on is how we are going to interact with parents. The parent-teacher meetings for which people used to come to school, I don't see that happening so much in the near future. The virtual parent-teacher meeting on whichever platform you did, it provided, it was very efficient because everybody stuck to time. Everybody knew that they had that much amount of time and they could do it in the convenience of their thing. You didn't need to reschedule it, and they had their privacy moment. So, in the school, whenever you do that, you do it in a large hall, you have large number of people there, and however quietly you're having that conversation, there is somebody else who is just standing next to you while, they're just wanting to come in and all of that. I feel that the meetings and the parent orientations and the interactions with them were far more efficient on the digital platform because it allowed everyone to speak. with this sort of platform, I found that the children who were probably the quietest, they found their way to express themselves, what they would have probably not done on a face-to-face scenario. Those children found their voice. I found that our high school, both academic counseling team as well as our social and emotional counseling team, they were getting more people who wanted, who reached out to them. Whether it was parents, as Sudarshana was saying, that they had their time to do things in the evening, it might change certain things how we have operated in the future. I think what we have got as schools is a digital learning platform. So going forward, we're not going to have a rainy day in Mumbai. I can say that for sure. Going forward, we are not going to have some sort of protest which is going out here. You just can convert to digital and you can sort of continue. But I have also found that meetings have been very, very efficient. And this is my real reflection over the last 1 year. When you start a meeting, you had people coming in with their cup of coffee and tea. Here, with the digital meeting, and there is no rush with those meetings today because we are doing those in the evenings rather than just at the end of the school. So it gave people time to think about it. It was more structured, the feedback, and great utilization of time. The classes, I think, we would love to go back and, as soon as possible, because everybody is missing that human connect. I mean, we are all social animals, right? So we love that connection. And I think anybody and everybody that we are speaking with are craving. I must tell you that when these 200 kids got back to school at different stages, while they were doing their examinations, whether they were doing Cambridge exams or the IB mock exams or whatever, my biggest time went to actually push them apart of, keeping them 3.5, 4 meters distance, because they were so excited to see each other. And it happened with the teachers as well. You just had to say social distancing all the time. So I think we are all missing that. I think, at this first anniversary, we're missing that. We understand how the technology is going to help us to, to sort of take our systems and processes even forward and make efficient use of time. Instead of doing after school meetings straight bang after the classes are over for everyone, you can probably now say, okay, we are all going to meet at 6 p.m. today, and this is the agenda. And I think people will be far, far relaxed to do that rather than rushing to do this and then going back in traffic to schools. So there will be these certain practices which are going to change. Parent-teacher meetings, or let's say meetings with where people used to, they had to come back to, drop into school. I do not know whether universities are going to travel. It's for them to answer. All over the world, they're going to be doing webinars by which, we are going to get a feel of people of these university places. Whether the conference is going to be, whether the student conferences, I must say that, one of the major aspects of school was about how to continue that holistic learning, right? So how students got innovative and organized conferences or exchange programs with an agenda, with schools around the world, and where each other, the schools around the world, they were all hungry to sort of do that. So we have found out a model where not only you can do a sort of a remote modeling of classes, but you could do a remote modeling of social interactions as well, or a remote modeling of an exchange program which could work around an agenda, or a conference. We did a Model Imaginations conference, which was completely virtual with 400 students. It was all organized by the kids, so it could happen. I mean, yes, probably the next time they're planning it a little better. So I think we need to understand all the things that we have been able to carry on in spite of being digital, and then sort of sieve out those which will increase efficiency to the process, and then take the rest as it comes. But I think think all of us want to get back to school. And I think if given an opportunity, we'll all get back to school tomorrow.
Thanks for those insights, Abhimanyu. I think actually this is a good segue to a little bit of a shift in the discussion, and I'm just again acknowledging that there is some discussion. Laura, thanks for chiming in terms of some of what you've seen with regards to admission decisions. I think there are probably some great conversations to be had moving ahead. Perhaps some folks can get together and do some session proposals and have some further discussions on trends and learnings from this past year for the annual IC3 conference at the end of August. Ramya, you've chimed in and talked about some concern that you have in going to a hybrid format in terms of what will be expected of teachers, counselors, and staff. And actually, what I would like to do is let's get our second poll series. And I'm aware that we've got about 15 minutes left in this discussion. And again, we know that there's so much to cover, and this is really just the start. But let's go ahead and get that second series of poll questions going. And this is really about your experiences in the professional setting and well-being, not of students, but of professional staff, teachers, and counselors. So just take a moment and reply to these three questions. And then IC3 team, you can go ahead and close the poll once we've had a critical mass of responses. Okay, so just take another few moments, and IC3 team, just go ahead and close that when you see a critical mass of responses coming in. Okay, and while we're waiting for those responses to come through, keep your questions coming, keep your comments coming in the chat. There's so much to chew through here. I think in one of our discussions in terms of preparation for this call, we got onto the topic of well-being. And of course, there's been lots of discussion about well-being for students, and rightfully so. That's really who we're here to serve. But there hasn't been a large amount of discussion around how you're all doing, how we're doing, and looking at that. So that's really where we're headed in this stage. Rachna is saying she could not see the poll. I just want to make sure that we've been able to execute that. If we can reveal those poll responses now, that would be good, and then we can go ahead. Okay, thank you. Rachna, I'm sorry if you missed it, but let's see. So since the start of the pandemic, 75% of you are saying you're dedicating more time to professional duties every day. And at the same time, 55%, still a majority, are also saying that they're dedicating more time to family, domestic, and other personal responsibilities. So having workload increase, professional workload increase, family workload increase at the same time. And how have I was very interested to see here, how have your relationships with your colleagues and coworkers been affected over the last 1 year? Okay, so a bit of a mix. I think 41% have said that their relationships have not been significantly affected, but 39% are saying that they feel less connected to their colleagues than they did before. 20% I want to acknowledge, are saying that they feel more connected. And I think, there's a universality in this experience that we're having in this pandemic, that perhaps that's part of it. Obviously, physically, most of us have been disconnected in that way. But for others, that you've felt you've become less connected, we'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Please feel free to share if you're willing in the chat, or ask some questions in that regard. But to our panelists, and John, if we can start with you. I know we've heard a lot. And of course, my former life as a university administrator, I know how much time is dedicated and how much heart and passion, especially admissions teams and others who are serving students, go into that. We've heard from university representatives saying that they're doing 7, 8, virtual fairs and events potentially every day. How are you keeping, what are you hearing from your team? What are some things that you're keeping in mind, after this 1 year?
Well, it's an interesting mix. Within our office, we house student life, international student life, and also international student and scholar advising. And so, you have two very those positions. The advising position's not terribly unlike.
John, we're losing you just a little bit there.
The counseling that we see. I froze. Yeah.
John, we had a little bit of interruption. Let me just come back to you. I want to get that thought, but I just want to give you a chance to work out the connection. I'm sure it'll come back. But Kate, perhaps we can switch to you, and if you have any observations, I know you yourself had undergone a major change in a role and things like that. But thinking of the schools that you work with across Africa, 15 schools across 9 countries, and of course, based on what you shared, some are still in person. But any feedback on this aspect?
I guess it's very much depends on personalities as well. So it is but I see there are less people who feel disconnected, I think, or less people who find it disadvantage in virtual communication. I based my assumption, for example, if I compare with the students who were completely online since March, but the percentage of those students, they were still successful, they still graduated the school successfully, and they still got the admission to the universities. It's probably the matter, I'm not sure about the percentages, how this, the personality type work in the world, but looking at the students, the percentage was surprising for me, because I think there are less people, because we had the students who confessed honestly and said, I'm having hard times, very good students, having hard times to catch up with everything online, studies, universities, application. So now she's happy to retake the year. And she said, I'm gonna do it again because now I feel better. But I think comparing these percentages, that was less in my understanding.
Thanks, Kate. And John, let's go back to you. I was really intrigued by what you were starting to say. So let's let you finish that thought.
Sure, and apologies for that. Yeah, the student advisors in our office, I think, have carried quite a bit of brunt. In terms of fatigue, mental, emotional work, all of it. The same is true, I think, for our international life staff. They're really the frontline caretakers of students. We are their home from home. And the culmination of this past year of political strife, social injustice, and pandemic has just really, I think, taken it out of caregivers. And it's taken it out on all of us as well. So, students feel it, but it's our jobs and our missions to take some of that from them as much as we can, and also ensure that we're providing community in a virtual world. Because that buzz that Sudarshana has mentioned, that's a caretaking that students give to one another as well. And so ensuring that they can do that in this new environment has been a challenge. It will be curious to see how quickly staff bounce back from that. Certainly faculty, and I'm sure teachers and schools are feeling the fatigue of course modalities, and also trying to make a lot of accommodations that are necessary for students to be successful. But I do think it's going to have lingering effects within the field. And again, I don't think particularly universities, but probably schools as well. I'd be curious about my colleagues' thoughts. But I don't think anybody comes out of this unchanged. And there will, I think, need to be a time of reflection and respite, frankly, for all of us. I mean, honestly, all of us as a people, but certainly within the education community.
Thanks, John. And Abhimanyu and Sudarshana, from your perspectives as school leaders, assuming that some level of this hybrid world will continue, and with all of the benefits that come along with that, and you've outlined a number of them already, thinking of staff and those, whether it's an in-service day or a training where teachers and counselors come together in person, those days where you're really bonding around, whether it's a service project or professional development, assuming that some of those pieces may not be possible in a physical sense. What are you thinking about, and what are you seeing at your schools in terms of keeping staff developing, keeping staff and teachers and other leaders healthy and all of that as well? Sudarshana, perhaps we can start with you and then Abhimanyu.
What we've been doing is giving them our staff a lot of opportunity to continue with their professional developments through virtual interactions. And within our community, what we've been doing, in our school, there's a tradition that when it's a teacher's birthday, the entire staff gets a small treat. It need not be a very big treat, but everyone gets a standard small treat. And we look forward to that. And that happens, we're a staff of about 100 teachers, so it happens 100 days in the year. And so missing on that, what we started was celebrating birthdays virtually and meeting each other. So we'd break out into little breakout rooms, do some activities, treasure hunts, fun stuff. So we remain connected, and we still remain connected through Zoom meetings, and not just doing formal interactions and doing formal work through meetings and faculty meetings and progress meetings, etc., but also having some fun online. And I think that's become a kind of a reality. In the last 6 months, I've seen birthday parties, weddings, funerals, professional meetings, so many things happening virtually. That it's kind of different and sad and eerie sometimes, but what else do you do? I mean, you have to adapt to changing times. Here, Jim, if I may, I'd like to jump into share experiences of new students that join in the international curriculum or any curriculum. When they come to school only for the 11th and 12th grade, they usually come in for the experience, to soak in the school culture and the possibilities in extracurricular activities and interactions to grow personally aside from academics. And these students, they've been sharing, all the new students have been sharing this with me during my one-on-one meetings. They're really missing out on the interaction. And so virtual interactions and conferences is a sort of like Mr. Basu said, it is one way of engaging socially, but it's still not the same as being part of the student council, taking decisions as a leader, forming, having meetings in person. And so I think that the feeling of isolation happened with the new students this year. I don't know if it happened with all new students or some new students, but it's definitely apparent. And for that, our school formed their own system. So the students form their own system. They form mentors who then reach out to these kids and, engage with them socially and academically, virtually, and give them the kind of support they need, because some of them felt intimidated by the competitiveness and how everyone was more aware than they were, so there were regional differences. So that was a bit, it became very obvious in the last few months. And the other thing, we as professionals have been interacting, but I feel what's changed is family interactions, where all families were thrown together working in the same space. Parents, students, their children, and they never we'd never had that before. Everyone working in the same space, and that became challenging. So it yo-yoed between having a lot of fun bonding as a family to getting on each other's nerves at some point. So these changes have really been challenging.
Thanks, Sudarshana. I'm acknowledging that we've come to the official end of our time here. I want to, Abhimanyu, I want to hear from you before we have to conclude, and if you have any thoughts that are on the top of your mind in terms of the track of this discussion now, perhaps 1 or 2 minutes from you, and then I'll offer just some remarks and suggestions as to where we can take the conversation from here. So Abhimanyu, we didn't want to end before we had a final word from you.
Yeah, muted. Yeah. I pretty much agree in terms of what I heard from everyone. While we have all adjusted to this new normal, and there will be a sort of hybrid before we get back to some sort of normalcy. As I said earlier, we are going to have certain practices from this platform which we are going to move forward. And there are 2 aspects I feel which is going to happen, which it will really impact, which is how how much time will be saved on actually doing the work that teachers are supposed to do, which is teaching and learning. Because with the automation that all institutions have gone through, a lot of donkey's work will be done by the technology automatically. And as a result of which, I feel that all of us can focus a lot more on professional responsibilities. And we will also see that how we can save our time, especially if we are in large cities with big crowded spaces, so that we could connect to each other on a digital platform as and when needed. I think these are the 2 big pluses as we move forward, because all institutions have got forwarded by probably 5 years worth of technology in 1 year. And that's going to help us as we move forward to figure out which of those are going to help us be more efficient with our time.
Thank you, Abhimanyu. And as we come to the conclusion, the IC3 team will be sharing a link for you to share feedback. It'll take about 30 seconds or so. If you have some feedback that you'd like to share, please do that. We've barely scratched the surface. We knew that coming into this discussion that there were, some topics that we could really hit on. As Ramya is saying, also very, very tip of the iceberg, just the slight, the tip of the iceberg here. But there is a forum for these discussions to carry forward. Just from seeing in the chat, we didn't get a chance to, of course, address any digital divide issues that are there. Access in a lot of ways has increased for those that have access to reliable technology, but it's actually gotten worse for those that don't have that, and we're already marginalized. So there are a lot of discussions in that area. Student experience, the parent experience, so much more to be said. I really want to encourage everyone on this call to put these ideas together and share your experiences in a session proposal submission for the annual IC3 conference. 2 weeks from now is that deadline. Get those ideas in. We need to hear from you. So this forum will continue. I want to thank Sudarshana. I want to thank Abhimanyu. I want to thank Kate and John for being here, taking time out of what I know is a very, very demanding schedule for all of you. Thank you so much for getting this discussion started about the next. And I think now it will continue to be focusing on what comes next for us. And thanks for everyone for joining around the world and for sharing your questions and comments. All the best to everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.